Okay, we're almost there, everybody. Okay, so now we are at the more recent political events of the past several months, weeks, and really just the past few days leading up to this current moment. So, just this past summer, in the summer of 2024, there was a significant community attention paid to a proposed residential development here in Orinoco. There were a lot of relevant citizen concerns regarding this, of which Wendy and Jim Phillips became very involved. Wendy Phillips led meetings in the homes of private citizens to discuss these concerns, and Jim Phillips became personally involved with individual community members. In the end, the proposal for the residential development was not approved by the city council. Around the same time frame, Jim Phillips submitted his candidacy for mayor. During the October city council meeting, a motion was made by Councilmember Paul Pendergrass to cancel that evening's public forum, which would prohibit the public from speaking before the city council. This motion was passed by every council member, with the only dissenting voice being the mayor. When pressed on this very controversial decision, Paul's answer was that they didn't want to hear any negative comments before the election. Perhaps this serves as an additional example of a predetermined city council decision. Just a few short days after this, a candidate forum was held where the candidates had an opportunity to introduce themselves and speak in front of the community. This was very explicitly not a debate, and every candidate was instructed to speak just of themselves and what they had to offer to the city. Jim Phillips was the last candidate to speak for the evening. Each candidate had 3 minutes for closing remarks. Jim chose to use his 3 minutes to attack Mayor Eichhorst's tenure as mayor, calling him out by name, and to spread lies and misinformation about Ryland to the entire community. Jim also used this time to artificially inflate his involvement and importance in several city projects and successes. So Jim Phillips essentially used those last 3 minutes I had, which is actually the same amount of time given to community members to speak at public forums. He used his 3 minutes to speak negatively just before the election, something that he had voted just days earlier not to allow anyone from the community to do. And this brings us to the most recent, perhaps the most shocking developments that have come from this era in Orinoco's local politics. This past weekend, which is obviously right before the election, on November 2nd and 3rd, community members were sharing information regarding the upcoming local elections on an established private community Facebook page. On this Facebook page, community members shared an image of a sample ballot that was obtained from getyourballot.org. This sample ballot could potentially represent positive change for the city of Orinoco. This resulted in citizens receiving threatening phone calls, a visit by a sheriff's deputy to the home of a private citizen, and a reported call by someone claiming to be a federal election judge, claiming the posts amounted to voter intimidation and violated federal law. The officer, however, determined that in fact no violation had occurred and that the community Facebook page did not have to be taken down. After a brief pause in activity and removal of previous posts, the page was resumed and community advocacy and communication was restored. So, to revisit my original question, what could potentially be the source of the significant toxicity that we have been noticing just in the past few years here in Orinoco politics? My interpretation of the events, through studying the context and the history behind all of this, draws a pretty direct line from the political activities of Wendy and Jim Phillips to the dangerous toxicity at the local government level in the city of Orinoco. Wendy, and to a lesser extent Jim, have sought positions of political power starting just within months of moving into the local area. Wendy has shared in previous interviews that she had no prior experience in politics before 2021. Her admitted inexperience seems to have been validated by her fellow Republicans when they ousted her from a GOP state committee. Remember, she has been described by Minnesota State Republican leadership as, quote, using her position as more of a launching pad for her own ambitions, and concluding that she didn't have the skills for a position where she's supposed to be voicing other people's positions rather than her own, unquote. The Olmsted County GOP, which Wendy chairs, is also described by state Republican leadership as, quote, a fallen state, not a functioning group, not run by serious people, unquote. Wendy's political failures and abuses really seem to be extending to the city of Orinoco. And now, with the possibility of her husband being elected as mayor of the city, we could find ourselves in a very bad spot. The citizens of Orinoco really need to understand the full context and history behind what has been happening locally and in our city for the past few years to be able to know how to make all of this better. I've had the opportunity recently to speak with several members of this community, and I'm convinced that if we all know the truth, we will do the right thing. The problem is, as you've probably witnessed here, the truth can be very difficult to unearth, but once we do, we have to speak to it and we have to bring it to light. For the well-being of everyone in our small community of Orinoco, we have to share the truth. The well-being of everyone in Orinoco has a much larger collateral effect. Our community might be small, but the impact of our citizens is powerful.